Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News channel. So, we're going to discuss an interesting thing today. Ripple itself does not seem to have any plans to actually leave the United States based on what their general counsel has said, but the advice from Ripple to other companies is to not launch their crypto company in the United States. Why is that? That seems kind of contradictory, but it's really not if you think about it. And we're going to comment on this. So obviously, in this article, Stuart Arley, which is Ripple's general counsel, he says the first from Blockworks, this is the first advice you give, the first piece of advice you give somebody who's thinking about launching a project, blockchain crypto project, obviously. Don't launch it in the United States because the rules are unclear. But in their own legal lawsuit, even if they lose the circuit court ruling, they will immediately appeal because they have options, actually, if they lose the circuit court ruling. They could appeal or they could leave the United States. So why aren't they taking their own advice and leaving the United States? It's quite simple. The US is too big of a market for them to actually leave. It is actually the biggest market. China is the second biggest market, and it's kind of closed as well. And there is no rule of law there. There's no court there that's going to rule against the central government, whereas in the United States, judges have actually ruled against the SEC before. Not often, but they definitely have. And also, a couple of judges have come out calling out the SEC for their ridiculous assertions on securities cases. So, your chances in the US of getting a favorable ruling might not be good, but your chances in China are practically non-existent. So, if you get out of the United States, you will actually have effectively been shut out of your two biggest markets. They can go to Europe, where it's actually a lot more friendly. They can go to the Middle East. They can go to Southeast Asia. But the thing is, so much remittance goes through USD in the United States, especially in the Western Hemisphere, and a lot of it in the Eastern Hemisphere actually goes through China. So you want one of those two markets in there. And I think the market and the ability for profit and domination in those markets is too good for Ripple to actually pass up. So basically, their general counsel, he has revealed in a new interview that the fintech company, Ripple, will immediately appeal if Torres doesn't grant them a favorable judgment. Now, there's three possibilities that can actually come up, and I'm actually betting on the second one. The first one is that the judge grants it in favor of Ripple. The SEC will immediately appeal because Gensler's basically signaled that. And this will drag out. But while they're appealing, we will operate under the assumption that XRP is not a security. And I think other crypto companies will actually operate under that assumption as well, that their coins are also not securities. Whether that's true or not, I'm not really sure. The second one, and the one I think is going to happen, is that Torres won't actually render a ruling right now, and they will have to either resolve disputed facts or go to trial. And that can drag out for a long, long time, so we'll have ambiguity, which is exactly what the SEC wants for 1, 2, 3, or 4 more years. Not really sure how long the trial is going to take, probably at least another year, if not longer. The third possibility is they'll rule in favor of the SEC. That is the worst possibility because, yes, Ripple will appeal, but in that time of appeal, cryptos and Ripple itself will have to operate under the assumption that XRP and thereby other cryptos are actually securities. But they're not going to leave the United States because the market is actually too big, despite Brad Garlinghouse's philosophical rantings. They're too deeply entrenched here. They have all their offices here. They have a lot of partnerships here. And leaving the United States would actually hurt them in reestablishing those partnerships. And they may not actually be able to use remittance or ODL via USD, which would actually kind of hinder them a lot on the global market because so much money runs through USD. I know some people are saying the Chinese yuan will eventually replace the USD. First of all, that's not true. But second of all, the Chinese yuan doesn't really have any liquidity on the world market either. So they can't really use that for ODL. So once again, getting shut out of your two biggest, by far biggest markets is not the way to actually go. So I think that's part of the reason they're not really thinking about leaving the United States either. They can, David Schwartz and Brad Garlinghouse can be philosophical and say that they're going to leave the United States and threaten that they're going to leave the US and take all their jobs, but based on just the market and where the action is for remittance and ODL, where they would be and how big the market would be if they just like cut out United States and China. That's probably why they're going to immediately appeal and not immediately move offshore. Now, however, they're telling other people to move offshore because they want that threat to be real. And the thing is, if you're not actually working in payments and remittance, it may not be as serious. Yes, you won't be able to get the investment money from the United States, but ICOs are kind of like illegal here anyways. And working in a much more better environment in terms of regulations in Europe or other places might actually spur your growth even more. There's been a number of crypto startups that have started up overseas because of this issue. And if you're not working in certain industries, it doesn't hurt you quite as much. So, and the thing is, if you're not already entrenched in the United States and you don't already have all your setup here, the cost is much less just to go overseas and not deal with this BS. Because he's also pointed out that Gary Gensler, when he actually files the complaint, he's already made his mind. He doesn't wait until like the ruling comes down. He just assumes that he's going to get the ruling in his favor, and that's just not how the law actually works. Because sometimes the ruling won't come down in his favor. So that kind of prejudgment, more or less, by Gensler makes it all but impossible to actually get regulatory clarity and any kind of regulatory equality in the United States. So I do believe this is a good device as long as you're not working in certain industries. But because Ripple is actually working in a certain industry where the US has a lot of dominance and where you would be shutting yourself out of like a huge, huge market if you leave, Ripple does not actually want to leave itself. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.